W.
Welcome back to Cohort W. I'm your Season 3 host, CW3 Susie Albert. For the next 3 episodes, we will hear from WO1s who have completed their first year as warrant officers. Today for Episode 6, we hear from WO1 Ilva Cerino. She is a Component 3 Reserve WO1 who completed her technical affiliation and has integrated into her first unit of assignment post-appointment. She talks about what she has learned, what has informed her success, and how she hopes to continue her development. Let's hear from her.
My name is WO1 Cerino. I graduated in March of 2023, so it's class 2310, the Green Griffins.
That's right, the Green Griffins. You had Mr. Owsley as your primary, right?
Yes, we did.
Best
He's now the
coin.
XO, I think.
He is the XO. It was one of the best coins I've seen. And also, as you know, I absolutely loved your class.
Yes. I think your classes that you taught was one of the best ones. They kept us up for sure. But I'm really proud of that coin too, because I helped design it.
Yeah, great coin. We might on LinkedIn add a picture of that coin because that was such a good coin. We'll highlight your achievements there, ma'am. How's that sound?
Great.
Yeah, Mr. Owsley is probably listening. Well, hopefully he's listening right now, and he's going to be like, heck yeah. So remind me, what month and year did you graduate?
March 2023.
Okay, so about, a year and 2 months. About 14 months ago, you graduated WOX, and you moved on to being a W1 and moving through your technical affiliation. Did you finish your warrant officer basic course since then?
I did. I went to WOBIC in July and graduated in November. So we have one of the longer basic courses.
What was particularly helpful for you in making a successful transition from being a newly appointed W1 to actually becoming successfully technically affiliated?
I think I'm still learning that.
Oh,
but yeah, it doesn't come overnight. You go to walks and you're still not aware of what you're supposed to do, and then you become qualified and you're still not where everybody else is. So you're just slowly picking up little pieces and nuggets of what you're going to become and what your foundation is. At least that's what I think.
When I tell you the truth about being CW3, I feel the exact same way.
Nice. Okay. So does it get better?
It never gets better. I think specifically what I mean, and something that I was actually talking to class 2414, the peach platypuses. What I was talking to them about within the last week is that there's almost an expectation, right? Because we say warrant officers are subject matter experts. And I have changed my language, honestly, in the last year to say warrant officers seek subject matter expertise, because you're a tech warrant. You had a ton of experience that was incredibly meaningful and instrumental for you being chosen as a candidate. And you didn't lose that, right? That experience didn't go away. So there's so many things that already within your expertise, intimately, thoroughly, over time in different conflicts with different missions and different echelons of command, et cetera. And then you come through and there's almost there'll be a horizon, an arrival point that now I am a subject matter expert. I haven't hit that. And I know that I'm good at my job, right? I know that I am, but then we went from counterterrorism and CT and COIN, to now what we're looking at is multi-domain operations and large-scale combat operations, MDO and LISCO, with peer and near-peer conflict. And I'm I can't claim it. I can't claim that expertise. And I say that out of solidarity. I'm not trying to overrun you or scare you for your future, but I say that out of solidarity that that like subject matter expertise is something that you seek. It's not necessarily something that like you arrive at and then never lose again.
Yeah, I think it's the expectation that everybody places on you. So right out of walks, I came back to my unit and everybody expected me to know everything because you're a warrant now. And that's what everybody affiliates warrant officers with, just knowing everything in their field. But I'm definitely not there yet. And things change so much in our field that how do you ever really get there?
How do you get there?
Read doctrine all the time.
You said it like I punished you.
Well, I knew where to find things before I became a warrant, but now I have to know it a little bit deeper. So publications change, laws change, requirements change. So you can never just read it one time and you're done. You memorized it. Great, you're off. No, you have to continuously read the changes and read the this and read the that. So you know what to do, because what's good in the United States for our field isn't the same in Europe. So now you have to read that. So it's just life learning, as you guys love to say.
We do. Yeah. And I feel like we love to say it. And now you're like, dang it, how right they were.
Yes. Yeah. Which isn't a bad thing. It's not. It like when somebody asks me something, I'm like, oh yeah, it's on this regulation. I'm like, man, you guys know everything. It's like, no, we just have to know where to look and be able to give you an answer or give you options. So I don't like not looking right or not knowing certain things and just saying, oh, yeah, I'll get back to you. It's being able to come back and help you in finding the answers or giving you different options.
Something that I think is sort of interesting is the concept of, and I'll specifically use like cultural competence, right? And I am speaking about competence generally, but I'm going to use a more specific example because I think it could be a helpful philosophical shift for a lot of warrant officers, is that like cultural competence is like, hey, you are incompetent maybe at some point in time, and then you take some classes, you engage in some sort of educational intervention, and it makes you competent. But there's not like this acknowledgement when we talk about competence in this way that ever really truly acknowledges that like there are periods of backslipping. And so because of this sort of like dichotomizing competence, there was a philosophy that was developed that's referred to as cultural humility. And so essentially the goals of cultural humility is not to look at yourself as like, did I arrive? Yes or no. That's what I mean by dichotomy, this or that, yes or no. Am I competent? Yes or no. And like for some people, it's like too painful to be like, I am incompetent, right? And it's also inaccurate because things I think exist in the gray space. But so the goals of this philosophical shift from competence to humility is that like you are meant, it's meant to encourage reflection, like continual reflection, promote awareness, and help to develop confidence, right? And that like if I have learned before, I can learn again. If I have learned again and again and again, then I'm a good learner. So even if I don't know how to do this thing perfectly, I know I have the skills to learn it so I can get there, right? So it really values like introspection, and I'll call it like co-learning, which is obviously indicative. It's like emblematic of humility, that like when you and I are in an environment together, we learn together and we learn how to be more effective together. And it's sort of, I think the biggest thing that I appreciate about cultural humility is that it normalizes growing over knowing. So like, I actually asked my fiance.
Yeah, I like that.
I do too, because when you said everybody sort of, you show up and everybody expects you to be perfect, I expect me to be perfect.
Yeah.
And that's a really painful feeling.
Heavy.
It is. It's incredibly burdensome and like emotionally heavy and physically heavy, because you'll work how many hours to seek perfectionism rather than like growing, right? Just like the process of growth and what it means for you and what it means for your unit and for your commander and for your soldiers. And also that like caring more about growing than just showing up and like being competent, being perfect. It builds trust like in yourself again, that it's achievable for you if you can access the right resources or ask the right questions. And in others, because then when you look at maybe mistakes that they make, you can say, hey, I was at this point. Let me introduce you to a resource. And I do think that cultural humility is one of those things that a lot of warrant officers sort of have more of an allowance to implement, because we are meant to be educators and trainers and innovators, right? So we can look at other people and be like, you know what, I was where you were at one point in time. Here is where I'm at now. I'm like, you can do this. I'm like, I'll guide you there, right?
Yeah.
And so I say that, you know, I think that like my intention just now was to diminish your anxiety. And unfortunately, I also believe that anxiety is an incredible tool for warrant officers. If applied appropriately, right? Like if applied appropriately.
Apparently I have extra tools, so if anybody needs them.
Yeah, we all really do. And like the reminder that like perfectionism isn't the goal, right? Like, but growing and like gaining experience and expertise and subject matter expertise, like that is our goal. Because I'll tell you, Mr. Cerino, I cannot claim subject matter expertise. I have not done MDO and LISCO. My MOS is drastically changing with the multi-domain transformation. And so I don't feel comfortable claiming it. And I do think that like I am comfortable with that expression of humility. And I am comfortable with the knowledge that I've learned a million times and I can learn again.
Yeah, well, we're all still learning it. So you can't be comfortable with it yet either. It's still evolving.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. And what are you learning that you feel is like a tool in your tool belt, a tool in your toolbox that is pushing you in that direction of like growing into your warrant officership and your expertise?
Ooh, there's a few things that are helping me right now. Obviously just doing my job and seeing my left and right limits in there and figuring how I fit into it, but actually effective communication, which doesn't seem like a very big piece of my technical field, but it's how to speak to commanders and other officers, and then how to talk to soldiers, because they have completely different goals. The mission's the same, but what each one of them have to do and their understanding of it is completely different. So how I approach one group is completely different than how I would speak to the other one. So my communication is actually a big thing right now.
I love that I asked you and you immediately went to the warrant officer competencies, right? The ICOLA, integrate, communicate, operate, lead, and advise. And so definitely we acknowledge that communication, like being a subject matter expert, I put that in air quotes, I know you can't see me right now, but being a subject matter expert, it's like, hey, that's great. You're brilliant. And if you can't advise anybody or if you can't teach anybody, then like, what is it worth?
Yeah.
Do you think that you have changed in the way that you communicate to soldiers? We'll start there. Do you think you've changed in the way that you communicate to soldiers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I do have to be a little bit more reserved now because it's a different role and they have different expectations of me. Mm-hmm. So you can't just go up to a private and speak to them just like a friend. You're still a role model to them. Right. So you have to give them something to kind of aspire to and set the standard. Mm-hmm. Before it was more of what did the soldiers need? I helped facilitate that, their pay and this, and that. And now it's more just focused on their understanding of the mission and different areas that they might have not been familiar with. Like I was at drill last month, working on one of the systems, and the soldier came over who had expressed interest in becoming a warrant officer. Okay. And I was like, oh, I'm just doing this, and that for a brief. He's like, oh, I've never seen that. I was like, really? And he said, yeah, I've never seen that. That's really cool. Can you show me? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I took that opportunity to just teach. So we didn't have to like do the little H's of soldierism, but just the basics of training, because now you're quote unquote the expert. So just the training aspect and being able to talk to them about things that they don't know.
That's awesome. How about the ways that you communicate with officers or commanders?
When I came back to my unit, there was a lot of personnel changes. So previously, they knew that I came enlisted to warrant officer, but now the new group just knows me as a warrant officer. So they come in, and not that everything I say is gold, but they don't question it. They're just like, oh, okay. And it's because I give them the background of it. It's like, hey, per the op order or per the regulation, or you can find it in here. So they kind of just take it, they're like, oh, yeah, well, she knows what she's talking about because she backed it up with some kind of doctrine that we can show. So
I do love hearing that.
Yeah. You learn to embrace it.
And I think I was, again, talking to 2414, and we, have gone through the doctrine classes and where to find it and what to do with it. There are a lot of resources that are not as painful as just reading, the black and white, paragraphically written, technically written doctrine. There are tons of, Army University is awesome. Army University Press. They create incredible videos. They create professional writing and publish professional writing. There are audiobooks, there are podcasts. So it doesn't just have to be sitting in a dark office. It can be more palatable than just that very dry interaction.
I'm definitely not suggesting just taking your nightcap and reading one of the ARs out there, but just like you said, the podcast, when I was listening to a couple of episodes before, you mentioned a few different regulations, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I was like, oh, let me write that down real quick. And I went back and I just looked at the sections that I really needed. And then I'd go back in and delve a little deeper. But you're not just sitting there, but it is important to read it and to know it.
After WOBIC, did you return to a unit or did you go to a new unit?
I went to a new unit.
Okay. What was your experience integrating as a warrant officer, as a WO1 in a new unit?
Well, I'm Compo 3 in the reserves, so it's a little different because you go there once a month, and what they really focus is on the metrics and your readiness. So just like the reserves, it's what you make of it. So going in and just introducing, hi, fresh out of WOBIC, everybody's like, okay, great. How can you help? So it's just finding your niche and seeing, okay, well, I see that you guys don't have this program going. Let me help the NCO that's in charge of it. Or, hey, we're lacking in this department. Let me try to integrate in that one. So it's kind of just, you have to be very, what's the word? Self-motivating and finding what to do as a Compo 3. Yeah,
I relate to that as Compo 2 as well.
Nice.
Has anything surprised you about this transition to being a warrant officer?
Not too much. Again, I think I'd have to go back with how people view, or how soldiers in general view warrant officers. You're the technical expert, so warrant officers know all. So they look to you and they're like, okay, what's your experience? What have you done? What can you teach me? And again, with officers, it's the same way. It's like, hey, your transportation, you probably know everything there is to know about it. And you're like, oof, no, but I will. So it's the weight that your rank carries now because of your expertise.
When I became a warrant, I could not believe how socially isolated I felt overnight. And this is a weird caveat for me, and how relieved I felt about that.
Yeah.
So because all of a sudden I went from having this basically a team all the time. You have a team and you have friends and you have,
ask your battle buddies.
Right. And then I felt, and I was entirely isolated as a warrant. And for me, it gave me a lot of discomfort, and time and space to really concentrate on making a purposeful transition in my career that I think if I had those social insulators, I don't think I would have put as much effort or creativity, or I think maybe had had as much freedom to change.
Yeah, I think I had messaged my sergeant major and told him being a warrant is kind of lonely.
It is.
Yeah, and not in a bad way, like boo-hoo, I'm crying because I'm lonely. But before you had your soldiers, you had a squad, you were the platoon sergeant, you had all this, and sometimes as a warrant, you're the only one. So
right.
Where's your place?
Yeah.
But I guess that's where quiet professional comes from.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really nice take on that term. Yeah, and I have had moments where I've had, the privilege of working very closely with other warrants. And it's just so interesting how your social sphere changes, shrinks when your sphere of responsibility expands so quickly overnight. And that's one of the things that you said is that what surprised you is how much weight you hold immediately upon arrival.
Yeah.
What is your plan for your continued growth?
Continued growth? Definitely learning my job more, being more hands-on. In the unit I'm in, we're in the brigade, so it's more of the planning elements, and not so much the execution of it. So I'd like to be able to kind of plan it and then see it through. And then just becoming a better leader and becoming more self-aware, learning more. You said that there's a change, that you've done a lot of self-reflecting, and you've changed multiple times throughout your career. And I think I'm ready to do that, kind of reflect and start learning about myself a little bit more. Yeah. See what that looks like with the Army. Yeah. And my job.
That's awesome. And I actually will put in the episode notes, I'm going to put the cultural humility model, because I think there's a helpful, and it's probably going to be confusing for me to explain, but there's basically a pyramid, a triangle essentially, with three intersecting circles in the middle. And on the outside of the triangle, it talks about lifelong learning, which you and I have talked about for the last 14 months, right? 15 months.
Yes.
Partnership building and self-reflection and self-critique, which I hear you kind of mentioning now. And then on the inside, it's skills, which you just said, hey, I want to learn my job better. So in those circles that are overlapping, it's skills, knowledge, and then behaviors and attitudes. And so I feel like you actually, without, and we didn't plan this, right? We didn't plan to talk about cultural humility.
No.
It's my superpower to make fun conversation boring. So, I haven't changed in that way, Ms. Cerino, in the last 14 months since you left me. But I think that you reflected on all of these elements, right? The lifelong learning being hey, people expect you to be perfect, so you have to continue to learn, and doctrine changes, and, countries are different, and missions are different, and commands are different. And then partnership building, you're talking about interacting with your soldiers and with your leaders and being able to advise well. And that self-reflection and self-critique, really taking stock and where am I where do I feel uncomfortable? Where am I maybe anemic as a leader or as a technician? And then on that inside, portion with the three circles, the skills, the work skills, the MOS skills, the branch skills, certainly knowledge with the doctrine and processes, laws, and then behaviors and attitudes towards the pursuit of all of those things. I just think you gave a really nice summary conversationally of what is a pretty complex topic.
Yeah, that was completely intentional.
Did you learn that at WOBIC?
No, not so much. I learned other things, but not that one.
Right, maybe some more functional things than philosophical. But what advice would you give someone that is about to become a W1, so kind of the tail end of WOC, or has just graduated as a W1, and sort of as they go through their technical affiliation and their integration into their unit, that massive transition in their identity and their responsibilities in the Army, what is one piece of advice that you would want to give them to help enable their success?
I have a lot of little pieces.
Let's do it.
In walks, they gave you, I think, what to expect going into your new unit. And then in WOBIC, we also got a similar paper that said your first 100 days as. I think you just go in, you can follow the paper if you want, if you need like a template of something, but really just go in with an open mind and want to learn. Because you're going in, you already know your job, but where do you fit in? How are you going to make the process better and the system better? So just go in with an open mind. Don't, I learned all of this. I already know. I'm going to change everything. Everything's going to be different. Like, just see where you fit in first. And then just be comfortable with communicating to your, be comfortable communicating to people in general. Because they don't know what you have to offer. They don't know what they might need, and you're going to be there to advise them in that. Yeah. So you could go in and it's a slow unit, or you go in and you take off running. So just be flexible and be prepared to go into the unknown.
Yeah, I love that. Great advice. I really appreciate your time. I was grateful for the time that, we had, in walks, just getting to know like your leadership style and your very natural leadership style, and all the questions that you had asked about what you were facing in Compo 3, because you knew that I was a Compo 2 person, and sort of like what that meant in warrant officership and in a Compo 1 centric school. I just have always appreciated, like, you have such a measured, predictable emotional state when you are confronting things that are like very complicated and very stressful. So I really appreciate you coming on and really being able to shed some light on what this transition point can entail and did entail for you. So I just wanted to thank you for your time. And I know that these things are a little bit nerve-wracking, right? To be like, hey, I don't know everything yet. And, neither do I. And we're together in that. And like, I think the more the cohort also expresses and acknowledges and normalizes that like growing is more important than like showing up and knowing everything. I do think that like your insights really lead to healthier dynamic intergenerationally in the cohort, and for folks that are entering that probably feel that same insecurity or that compulsion for perfectionism. Yeah.
No, thank you for having me. I'm glad we got to speak on Compo 3 a little bit. I feel like that gets left behind or doesn't get talked to in the experience of the overall transition. So thank you for allowing me.
As we close today's episode, I wanted to acknowledge Miss Cerino. I don't think it's an easy thing to come onto a podcast, and I say that as the host. It hasn't been easy for me, and certainly not as a WO1, to really discuss growth and vulnerability and learning and potentially mistakes, or where you feel inadequate or underprepared. So I just really wanted to acknowledge what she said. I think it's worthy of celebration, and acknowledge the courage of the WO1s that we've asked to come on here and demystify things that as senior warrants, as mid-grade warrants, as seasoned warrants, we maybe haven't also quite figured out entirely yet. So big thanks to her and her courage, and to the WO1s who will come on in the next couple of episodes and discuss these necessary elements of warrant officership and leadership. If y'all have any questions or feedback on what you would like to hear more of this season, please email warrant.officer.history@gmail.com. As always, for updates and information, please visit the Warrant Officer Historical Foundation at warrantofficerhistory.org. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.